Now, right up until a couple months ago, the Barrage implant on the Machariel was classified as one of the most overpowered and one of the most broken implants in the game. However, with time that has changed. Currently the most overpowered implant in the game is the Bomber Tactics implant, or also known as the Run Bombs. But today I'll be taking a look at the Machariel and at the Barrage implant. In the recent April balance patch, they have adjusted the implant a little bit. They have reduced its maximum DPS, but they have also enhanced the level 30 attribute, and they have improved the implant duration, and I'm personally fine with that. Now, the Machariel is still the exact same ship as it used to be. They haven't changed the stats, everything is still the same. I have a very special place for the Machariel. After all, this is one of my first faction battleships, my very first faction battleship to be precise. And I have been using this ship for over 3 years now, and I have been enjoying flying it. I have been enjoying flying it a lot. So, let's take a look at the build. So this build is a overall multi-purpose build. You can use that for PvE, you can use this for PvP. It's a tank build. I like to build tanks. I mean, I think most of you guys already know that. The third performance is pretty nice. 2065 DPS for a tank build is really solid. Dual Nosferatus, a Scrambler and Web, dual boosters, dual adaptives, a damage control, and a afterburner. Now, I have the golden core installed, but the golden core is currently bugged, so I can't click on it, but I will go later in this video and I will show you the stats of the core. This is the sleeper core, and I will show you how the upgrade looks and how the AI core looks. I'm personally not a big fan of the AI core, but I'll show you how the things work. The rigs on this are the 4P combat integration rigs. The first build will be a little bit more expensive, and I'll also show you a more cheaper option as well. Full on tank, maximum resistance and maximum shield volume. Now let me quickly just kill this ship that is shooting at my revelation there. So overall, a build like this should run well, but you should keep in mind that the Machariel isn't really a ship that's meant to be a tank, and I'll talk about that more as I go into the combat part. 2 auxiliary thrusters and 1 capacity battery, 327,000 hit points, 57, 62, 72 and 54% shield resistance. The Machariel can be a shield or armor tank, and I will show you both shield and armor tanks today. And I will show you the cheap and more expensive build. So, let me go and show you the implant. Now, the implant for a shield tank is definitely the Barrage Repression, or if you are a sniper, then the sniping technology is also good. Now, this implant, like I mentioned before, used to be ridiculously strong, ridiculously overpowered, and the Machariel with a DPS build used to achieve about 55,000 DPS. Now, that number has been significantly reduced over time, and I believe now the DPS should sit about 20-30,000. That's my rough estimate based on the nerfs that have been happening over time to the implant, and of course based on how everything else has been changed in the game over time. All that has an impact on the DPS. And my initial goal when I bought the Barrage implant was to force a nerf, and I think my quest in forcing a nerf has been partially successful. I will still say that there should be a lot more nerfs happening, and I expect a lot more nerfs to happen to all the implants. But for starters, I think it's a step into the right direction to nerf what's overpowered. So, I used to have about 15,000 DPS with a build like this a long time ago, back when I originally started testing out implants. This basically was my DPS with a build like this. With a tank build, I was able to get about 14,000 DPS. Now the tank on this thing looks pretty good, 500,000 hit points, and overall the resistances are pretty good. Now you also have the damage control that you can activate for the extra tank as a panic button. After all, the Machariel has a bonus on all the angel ships have a bonus on damage controls, so having them is always a interesting idea. I use the damage control on my PvP Machariel constantly. 7.9 thousand DPS. So when I originally tried out the Barrage implant with a build like this, I got about 14,000 DPS. So it looks like I lost half of the DPS, which is interesting. Now, someone mentioned that the effect of the implant doesn't correlate with the stats that you can read on the implant, and that's I think I mentioned that before, but that's because the game currently is a little bit bugged. So all the numbers are not really the correct numbers. They're lower than the game actually shows, which is weird because I thought that they have patched that, but I guess they haven't. So while the effect is applying the new changes, it still shows the old stats, but the effects have been changed. So this is a full-on brick tank, a build that I used on my Machariel with a DPS build, and you get some pretty nice passive tank: 84,000 shield, 86, 88, 91 and 87% resistance, which is pretty solid. Good for a bait, good for a fleet, overall a combat PvP build. Don't use passive tanks for PvE unless you are a sniper. If you are a sniper, then you can easily just go with full-on range, full DPS, and just avoid getting close to anything. But this build is more of a PvP build. I used it on my Machariel. Does work really well. Does work really well with the DPS rigs if you want to have a good passive tank. You can do something like this with extenders for more passive shield tank. 104,000 hit points. Now the resistances will be a little bit lower, but you will still get some pretty good stats when everything is active. And with a build like this, you can also add the extender general unit that will improve the passive shield even more. There is a lot of things that you can do with the units. Again, you can set them up the way it works for you. I always recommend that you go and enhance the modules as much as possible, because that way your ship will perform better than before. But again, as for the implant, you don't have to go for level 45. Level 45 is overkill, and honestly, level 45, above level 30, the Barrage is basically like, it's pointless to use, because the guns shoot so fast that the server doesn't count them. So above 30, yeah, it's pretty pointless to go with the Barrage implant, and I would say pretty pointless to go with most implants. Level 15 is enough, level 30 if you really like the ship. I have the Barrage on level 33, and I feel robbed for those extra 3 levels that I went over 30, so don't go over 30. 30 is basically the ideal spot. It's still expensive, yes, but eventually you can get there with time, and don't go above 30. And still, I got some pretty good stats with that build. Now let me show you something a little bit cheaper and a little bit more, let's say, down to earth. So I swapped the rigs for the normal rigs. I covered EM, thermal and kinetic, and this will work for a tank build, about the same build as before, with the 3 adaptives and 1 reactive hardener. You will lose the shield hit points from the integration, because I have integrated the shield volume rig within the 4P integrations, but you get about the same resistances and just a little bit lower overall hit point status, but the resistances are about the same. The most notable change is the reduction in the shield volume, but it should not be a big problem, because you still have a lot of shield, and in combat I don't think that it will be that noticeable, especially because this is a much cheaper option. And now onto the armor tank. This is the active armor tank. dual webs, Scrambler, Nosferatu, dual armor repairs, triple adaptives, and a afterburner. And just in the combat rigs, I have dual 4P and one 3P integration. This is the more expensive option, but again, the tank integrations on the Machariel will not work the same way as they would work for an Abaddon, for example, or a Rock or a Hyperion, because the Machariel isn't really built to be a very good tank. So going with tank integrations on this ship works, but I wouldn't really recommend it because the Machariel isn't really meant to be a tank. Now with armor tank, you can easily go and use the thermal circulation. If you don't have the Barrage implant, don't worry, you can use the thermal circulation on this ship. The thermal circulation works on all armor tanks. And you still have some solid DPS. Can be good for PvP, can be good for PvE, should work really well against lasers, because lasers damage does significantly fall off when they hit armor, and it's very easy to tank lasers on armor. So in armor space, I guess you can go with a armor tank build Machariel. It will work really well. And now I have enhanced the armor repairs, the Nosferatu as well. It should last a pretty long time under load. And now let me undock to show you the active stats. But again, as I mentioned before, the Machariel is not really a tanky ship. It's not really a good tank. It's meant for hit and run. It's meant for DPS. So while it's works okay with a tank build, I would still recommend to go with a more DPS oriented build with some tank to go along. But primarily, I would probably go with DPS, because the tank is in most cases going to be just about average on this ship. 83, 87, 87, 85. Now this looks pretty good on paper, but in combat it always felt like the Machariel was lacking in tank. Always felt like that. Doesn't matter if it was shield or armor, it always felt like it was a little bit lacking, comparing it to some of the other faction battleships and some of the other normal battleships. Now you can also go with a build like this, with triple adaptives and one reactive and a damage control. This can be a good passive PvP build. Works good in a fleet. I say fleet because you don't passively regenerate armor, so you have to have a logistic ship at your side to constantly repair you. So for a fleet, this can work really well. It should have some really good tank against lasers. So if you have to fight a fleet that uses lasers, then armor definitely is the way to go. Even if the tank on the ship isn't classified as the best, with the reactive hardener, you should be able to tank a lot of laser DPS, and it will be much easier to tank when you have a logistic ship at your side. Meanwhile, the same build that I showed you previously with the shield works if you're solo, because the shield does regenerate on its own, and you can just jump through a gate or dock and just repair the shield without costing anything. So the shield tank, full passive tank, is definitely good for solo and for a fleet, while the armor passive tank, definitely going to work really well for a fleet. I guess you can use it for solo, but you will have to eventually repair the armor, and that might cost some ISK. And again, the cheaper option, one thermal, one kinetic, and one explosive pump to cover all of the armor holes, and the stats look pretty good on paper. But again, this is one of the cases where the stats on paper look better on paper than they actually work in actual combat. And I think that's just because the Machariel is such a ship. I mean, not all ships are meant to be brick tanks, but the tank on the Machariel is, I would say, still solid, average solid, somewhere between that. It's still a fantastic ship, so that doesn't change the fact that this ship is still really good. 573,000 hit points, and with the damage total active, it's 1.6 million, 96, 96, 96, and 95%. Actually pretty good. Should again be really tanky against lasers, and overall should be able to withstand quite a bit of DPS, but again works really well if you have a logistic ship at your side. And now on to my favorite part, the PvP builds. So I told you that I will show you how the nanocores, how the golden nanocores look and work. Well, I have the sleeper nanocore over here that I will fit on the ship. Now the nanocores are bugged, everything is currently a little bit bugged, as you know, as to no one's surprise that's the case. So Nanocore is now fitted. I have the sleeper mode so that it doesn't interfere with the DPS, so that my DPS is going to be about the same as without the Nanocore. I mostly use the Nanocores for the aesthetics. Now, well, this is the AI window. The AI has been selected. You can go high-sec combat systems or the current system. High-sec combat encounters. You can set how many jumps you want to cover. You can also set the default warp distance from 0 to 100. Although I have seen reports of the AI yeeting snipers at 0 on laboratory. That did not end well for these ships, that's for sure. They got absolutely torn to shreds. So while I'm not really a fan of the AI thing, I can see what the developers wanted to do, but still. I'm not really a big fan of this because it's weird, weird to say the least. But you have players who like the core, so I will show you how it should work. 3,700 DPS, basically about the same DPS as my PvP Machariel. My PvP Machariel has slightly more, which is kinda interesting, and that was basically the PvP build that I recommend that you use for the Machariel. It has tank, it has good DPS, it can last for a very long time, and it can defeat 90% of ships in a 1v1. The problem would be heavily armor tanked or heavily shield tanked ships. They have a chance to outlast the crazy DPS that you can unleash with the Machariel, and this is where the Barrage implant falls short. Extremely high burst that can be easily tanked by a really good shield or armor tank ship. The reason why the Barrage implant used to work so well is primarily because most ships that are out there nowadays have unfortunately a bad build. I mean, you all guys know that there is a lot of cursed tanks out there. And last time on the Rattlesnake video I actually forgot to add the pictures. Hopefully I don't forget to add the pictures here, but literally out of 10 ships, 8 ships have a bad build, 2 ships have a good build, which is very sad, and this is why the Barrage implant is so good and so effective, because it deletes ships that have a very, very bad tank. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't. It used to be very good against heavily tanked ships, but nowadays that has changed and it's no longer that good against heavily tanked ships. 14,579.28 DPS. This used to be about 25, 26, 30,000 a long time ago. So overall, I definitely see a reduction in the overall maximum DPS, and 23,000 DPS. Well, this is still absolutely mental, and if you ask me, absolutely insane. It's just fancy numbers on paper, because nowadays in actual use, that DPS is never going to be actually applied to the target. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have multiple Machariels with the same implant, with the same level, that's dangerous. Okay, that's dangerous, and that is something that is still ridiculously overpowered. We still run the Machariel fleets with the same purpose. It works, but it used to be a lot more worse. So again, while the nerf it's definitely there, I would say that the nerf has to be even more, and gradually over time it will be nerfed. But the Barrage implant can be easily countered by a good tank. Sounds crazy that I say that, but yeah, we have tested it out, and Back in the day, you were not able to tank a Barrage Machariel because of the 50,000 DPS that it could deliver. But now you actually can tank a Barrage Machariel if you have a chunk battleship, chunk cruiser, if you are fighting a ship that uses, if you're fighting a cruiser or battle cruiser that uses the barrage implant, then a chunk battle cruiser can easily withstand a DPS glass build, and you can actually kill them because once their burst DPS is out, their DPS will be significantly reduced. Now this is more of a PvE build that I'm showing you here with quad gyro stabilizers, and well, the DPS is still crazy, 26,000 with the 26,000 with the last gyro stabilizer. Now the fun fact, this shoots so fast that the game doesn't count all the hits, but it does reduce the barrage ammo. This is one of the things that wasn't the case before. Was only the case with the Damiel because it was firing at 0.01 seconds, but now it's the case with most ships. I think the developers did that on purpose, but I don't know. I have no proof of that, so I don't really know what's going on with that. But that DPS is not going to be applied. And again, if you have a good tank, then that DPS does look terrifying, but it's not going to do much because that DPS will be significantly reduced if you have, let's say, 80%, 90% resistance on shield or armor. If you have a damage control, that also can help a lot because you can absorb basically all of the barrage implant with the damage control. So while it looks terrifying, horrifying on paper, in real use it's just not going to be as lethal as it looks. Now my AI here has yeeted me in a anomaly, although I set the AI to go do missions, but I guess not. The AI wants to go and run the anomalies. So my AI here is a little bit stupid, so my apologies for that. Let's just go to the mission that I planned to do. But this AI doesn't like to go to do the mission, so yeah. The AI is definitely not perfect, and definitely has a lot of room for improvements. It feels like a beta test, honestly. So yeah, it's pretty silly. Now what was I talking about? Oh, I was talking about how lethal the barrage implant actually is. Now, like I mentioned before, nowadays with a good build, since most players don't have the barrage over 15 or over 30, you will not encounter like 50,000, 25,000 DPS Machariels. They are extremely rare. My Machariel has 17,000, well, used to have 17,000 DPS. I think now the DPS is like 14,000, so I lost about 3,000 DPS on my own Machariel, but it's not going to be as lethal as it used to be, and you don't have to worry about a Barrage Machariel. Now, a solo Barrage Machariel is not going to be a big problem if you have a good tank. I mentioned that probably 50 times by now, but a problem does happen when you have multiple Barrage Machariels shooting at you. That's when things can be a little bit more problematic. Now, again, if you have a good tank, if you are flying, let's say, a Rattlesnake, if you're flying a Rock or an Abaddon, these ships with the right build can easily hold against a Barrage Machariel. They can actually easily hold even against DPS Dreadnoughts, which have constant 50,000 DPS, and those battleships with the right build can easily withstand that for a very long time. We have tested that all out, and I was actually very surprised when I found that out. I didn't expect to have a battleship that was able to hold so much damage. So I think the big numbers scare a lot of players, and honestly I don't blame the player. They do look terrifying. I was shocked when I saw the DPS on this thing for the first time, and with time again, it became much more easier to counter the barrage implant. Now, why do I say that the drone bombs are much more lethal than the barrage implant? Well, there are some ships that can have like 5,000 DPS, and that's a lot of alpha damage. That's pretty hefty alpha damage. That's battleship alpha damage, glass DPS of a battleship. And we have the Stratius, which can easily achieve that DPS with the drone bombs. After all, we have received the offense drones. Now, the Stratius by itself, isn't really a special ship in any way, shape or form, but there is a special thing that the Stratius can do. It can immediately tackle upon decloaking, and you can load the drone bombs, cloak, creep up on the target, decloak, and just delete them in 1 second. Because most ships don't have a good tank, and honestly, by the time you react to click on the damage control, or by the time you react to actually repair the armor, the Stratius has already killed your ship. Now, not necessarily a problem with bombs, although it is a big problem with the drone bombs, but it's more of a problem of how the ship works. Because Sister of Eve and bombers can decloak and immediately tackle. That's their trait. So the ship's trait combined with the implants, and the drone bombs haven't been nerfed. Like, they haven't been nerfed since day one. They have been actually buffed when they gave the drone bombs the remote reload, and that's basically the last time that the developers have touched the drone bombs. That made the drone bombs the top place in the most overpowered implant in the game. Mostly because the Stratius, because of the crazy DPS that it can achieve, and the fact that you have absolutely no chance against one unless you are expecting it. And a lot of players don't expect a Stratius, and even if they expect one, by the time they click on the damage control, they're already in hole, because that's just how much DPS that thing can do. So back in the day, that used to be the case with the Machariel. You have a tackle bomber or a tackle Stratius that tackles the battleship, and then the Machariel warp in and just unload the barrage implant. Well, that can be countered because you see the Machariel warping in, and you can prepare yourself for the DPS. If you have a good tank, then you have a good chance of actually surviving the barrage of multiple Machariels. However, with the Stratius ships, it's not going to work that easily, because let's say there is multiple Stratius ships and they all decloak at the same time. They'll just delete your ship. There's just nothing you can do about it. And that's one of the next things that I expect the developers to nerf. And in all honesty, all implants will be nerfed gradually. That's what they have been doing. The one thing that pisses me off is the fact that the drone bombs haven't been touched in a while, or perhaps they have been touched, but I haven't seen it. I don't remember reading anything about the drone bombs on the balance patch, which is really weird, because we destroyed a lot of ships with Stratius cruisers using drone bombs, and I honestly expected that to be changed. And I'll be honest with you, I expect that to be changed, although I'm not really sure when it will be changed, but it's a fact that it will be changed. After all, that's just how ridiculous the drone bombs are. Now, besides the Stratius, some of the other drone ships, I mean, all the drone boats have literally became very lethal now, especially with the drone buff, especially with the new drones and with the new updates, with the new modules and everything included. They really made drones extremely lethal now, especially for PvP. Now, I know that drones still used to have like weird bugs where they wouldn't listen and things like that, but that seems to be mostly fixed now. I haven't seen any problems with drones in a long time, actually. And it's very very weird how things go. Nestor can have like 20,000 DPS with the drone bombs. I will show you what I'm talking about when I go and jump in the Nestor, although I think the Rattlesnake. And Rattlesnake and the Nestor are two of the highest DPS run boats in the game. And just as I said this, the price of the Nestor will go up, although the Nestor is a very weird ship. It has a very weird spot in the game. It's the most unique ship in the game, actually. It can be used for everything, from exploration to combat to PvP to PvE. You can actually use it for mining. It's a logistic ship. It's a guardian. It's everything. Like, that thing is literally everything. The space blender is amazing. So you can technically make a DPS build space blender. I will show you how to do that. And I personally think that's going to be hilarious because, again, 20,000 DPS just in drones. That's what the Nestor can do. And with the recent buffs, with the recent changes, yeah, that thing is going to be absolutely insane. And I will show you how that works, because that's what I do. I like to show you how things work in this game. But back to the Barrage implant. The Barrage implant, while it's good for PvP, it's not really a PvE implant. It's not good for PvE because you can only like burst down one battleship, and then you have to wait for a very long time to actually reload the ammo. That's basically the issue with this implant in PvE. You will have 20,000 DPS for 5 seconds, and then you're back to 4,000 DPS for the most part of the mission, which, you know, does put the Machariel at a disadvantage comparing it to some of the older ships. The Hyper Recoil lasts long, the Apocalypse Striker, the king of PvE, lasts extremely long, basically lasts until you miss the target. Then the Missile Implant also lasts very long. The road bombs outperform the Barrage implant in PvE because of the remote reload, and it does take 60 seconds for them to fully recharge, while this thing takes decades to recharge, which I don't mind to have the Barrage implant recharge for so long. It's a balancing factor. Now, the thing that I don't like, again, that the run bombs don't have is the long reload. They reload in 60 seconds, and you can remote reload them. You get 150% DPS boost, which is still crazy. You still get crazy DPS with the 150% boost. If you don't have like 20,000 DPS, you'll have 10,000 DPS with the drums, with the halving of the overall maximum alpha and DPS. You will still be blowing up ships ridiculously fast, while the Barrage implant does have to wait for a long time to recharge, and again, that makes the run bombs much better than the Barrage in a combat scenario. Now, for immediate burst, both are about the same, with the big advantage on the run bombs that the drones don't shoot so fast that the game doesn't count the shots. So you get the DPS that it's shown on the number. Meanwhile, you don't get the DPS with the Machariel because it shoots so fast the server can't count it, which is again extremely hilarious and makes the run bombs a lot more lethal than the Barrage implant. And I have tested it out. I don't know how many hours I put into testing things. Every time before I go and record, I go test things out for a very long time just to get everything right, and at least to try to get everything right. Sometimes I still do mess up for a lot of reasons. Most of the time I mess up because I record at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the night, and I'm usually extremely sleepy, basically sleeping and recording at the same time. So of course, sometimes I do get things wrong. And well, I did 2 missions with the Machariel just because I like to fly this ship. It's a good ship, fun ship to fly. And what do I think of the Barrage implant? Well, don't go above level 30. Actually, I would say you don't even have to go to 30. About 15, 20, that's probably going to be the most cost efficient level. If you really like the ship, go to 30. but above 30 all the DPS that you have is mostly for show. It's not going to do a lot more on the target. The difference between 15 and 30 in PvP, from my personal experience, is minimal. Honestly, it's really minimal, because again, most ships that are currently flying out there don't have that good of a build, and it doesn't matter if your implant is 15 or 30, you will have more than enough DPS to delete them within, like, I don't know, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. If the target is a bit more tanky, then doesn't matter if the implant is 15, 30 or 45, the target will survive the barrage implant. If the pilot that you're shooting at has a proper build, then doesn't matter what level of the implant you have, they will be able to withstand. And in that way, the Machariel might not be the optimal choice. If the target is ridiculously tanky, bring a ship that is also ridiculously tanky, or bring a ship that can kill the capacitor, and then without the capacitor they will be slowly going down. So with that being said, hope that you guys have enjoyed this little run with the Machariel, with the golden core Machariel. I don't like the gold cores, to be honest. I mostly use I actually use the default, like the primary stat of all nanocores. I don't upgrade them, I just use the default stats for everything. But with that being said, hope that you guys have enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, play safe, and I'll see you next time.